All right, I think it's safe to say we could have probably filled a whole day on that topic and with those three esteemed guests, but we do have others to go. What the next panel will cover is productivity for the business of one, and it's ushering in kind of our shift toward some of the more enterprise-focused bot companies we have. But with that, I will leave it to Spencer Lazar from General Catalyst.
Thanks, Patrick. How's it going? This is an awesome venue. I've been upstairs several times, but never been in here. This is great. So I'm Spencer Lazar. I'm a partner at General Catalyst. We're a venture firm that started experimenting with bots relatively early. We were the Series A investor in Digit and have 5 or 6 other very early stage bot companies in the portfolio. I've been involved with 2 of them, Growbot, and Begin, both Valley-based, but fun getting to know you guys for the program, and I thought maybe we would start by just doing a quick intro since you haven't demoed yet.
Yeah, so I'm Roy Pereira. I'm from Zoom.ai, and we've built an operating system for your workday within the office as a bot that works and lives inside of your office.
I'm Jia. We're building Warren. It's a sidekick for freelancers that's a combination of messenger bot and web application.
Sweet. So when we think about productivity, we think about software doing things for us and making life easier. With a bot, it's sort of funny. You have a dialog box that's open and you can sort of ask it to do anything. How do you define the parameters of what you do and what you don't do for your users?
Yeah, that's a really good question because everybody thinks of Her or some other sci-fi movie when they think bots, right? And they expect it to do everything. And we've heard that before from other panelists. And you see it in logs. You see people coming in and asking all sorts of weird questions that are definitely not domain specific to what you're doing. I think it's setting expectations up front. It's like, hey, this is what we do. Ask me about this. And then when they go off script and they start asking for dates or even worse, you try kind of nudge them back. It's like, yeah, I'm a bot. I can't really do that for you. Why don't you try asking me for a meeting instead?
We handle it similarly, but another thing is that I think when we're setting up expectations up front, we can talk about different skills like modules. So when it's clearly defined with names of these are the modules that we currently provide, then the user already know why they're coming to the bot in the first place. And then other things like when they do ask a random question or a question that's unrelated to the actual functionality of the bot, we can either try to create some personality and have fun with it, or we can have set boundaries for, okay, these are things that we're not currently talking about.
And how does personality work at your companies? How do you either automatically train or use humans to inject levity and fun into the experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we're at the beginning of really doing this well. Personality today at Zoom is really our personalities. Everybody that touches the code, touches the templates for the responses and all this, everybody injects their own personality. It's like, oh yeah, I want to say this. That would be funny if a clip of John Travolta came up, And so it's all of ours. But I think that's going to progress, and it has to, in terms of multiple personalities. But it has to be written by real professionals, unlike us engineers.
What about GIFs?
GIFs are awesome. In most platforms, I think all platforms support GIFs, even text. For example, emojis, not GIFs, but emojis are really popular, younger demographic. You can actually ask it to do stuff with just GIFs, with just emojis, and we will translate that. But sending back GIFs as well, especially with Giphy, really popular.
Plug GC investment.
Even with GIFs, I think there's a way to set around how you want to present your brand. So there are GIFs that are with more kind of photographic type of GIFs, and then there are ones that are more illustrative. So for instance, with Warren, we use specifically the more illustrative ones to match with our branding and our personality. And thinking about personality, I think it's also it's one of the really fun things about building bots versus other software too for the bot makers. And you can really kind of play around and create this fictional character to think about how as a user, they will want to engage with the software. I think I was recently reading about something, an analogy that really resonated with me. It was about kind of the interaction between a waiter and a customer at a restaurant. So you have a menu, you have someone who serves you, and then when you're interacting and trying to get information from the menu and you're talking to that person, like think about what would actually make sense in that situation and how to make it more fun and more interesting.
But aren't we just kind of recreating ourselves in our bots? Or is that just us?
As entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
you could have many personalities in your, you could choose your own personality as part of your service. I mean, one of the things that I'm always fascinated with in this category is, as entrepreneurs, especially in the early days, we're so fascinated and captivated by the idea of customer success, right? You want your customers to be happy. But at the same time, you bump up against the potential human constraint. There's one way of solving the problem and driving productivity for your customers, which is throwing bodies at the problem internally within your companies. And the other is by being ruthless and focused only on sort of automation and software-driven solutions to driving that productivity. How do you balance those as you think about kind of delivering on your user promise and building your company to scale?
So I think setting their expectation up front, which I mentioned earlier, I think is super important. Phil Libin has a great saying. He says that bots are basically service animals. They should be service animals, or thought of as not humans, like in Her and other sci-fi. So the expectation is lowered, right? You're not expecting this bot to be a real person. You shouldn't be asking them out for a date. Although I think we're getting to the point, as we've seen with Hugging Face, for example, where I think a lot of people, especially geeks, would rather interact with a bot than real people. But setting that expectation up front, that means that they're not going to get annoyed when it doesn't work later on, which it will not work at some point.
I think we are still learning. We definitely learn a lot from BotCamp and looking at other bot companies. I think because many people have mentioned previous to this that when people think of bots and AI, immediately they jump to science fiction. The expectation is just so high right now for bots, and especially with this hype around what bot can accomplish and how different it is from software. And I think one is setting expectations, and it's also interesting to try to meet some of those expectations and or what the users are thinking the bot can do through different ways of anticipating things what talking about dates. I think you can go on a date with Poncho if you ask, or in certain situations, and it's actually really fun. It's totally not related to weather, but it provides a new experience that's very unexpected. So there are things that you can kind of just think about human behavior and what would put a smile on someone's face, and being able to not totally do it through AI, but just through writing and imagination could be.
I think there's two extremes, right? One is that we don't want to disappoint our users by over-promising that it's going to be a human-like experience today, or maybe ever. But I think on the other side, bots can do things that humans just can't, right? They're working 24/7. Like you converse at 3 a.m., it's going to say, yeah, awesome. Here's where you can get some snacks right now around you. Not our bot. That's not what we do. But we see a lot of OMG, wow, I can't believe it just did that. And it was so fast. Yeah. So I think that's the experiences that you have to gravitate as a bot company, or as a company that has a bot UI.
Do you think about yourselves as bot companies?
No, and that's why I just corrected myself.
Yeah.
I think the chat UI is very relevant for what we're doing. Like someone just said, you want to get rid of all the search clutter, all the tabs. Where did I leave that? It's just like, hey, I need to meet with Patrick tomorrow. I don't care. Just
right.
Do it for me.
Right.
So the chat UI is a great medium for that.
Yeah.
Could a mobile app do better? Maybe, but not as good as chat UI. But that's a UI. And I think this is just the next great UI step that we're taking. Just like, Salesforce came out in 2000 and said the browser is it, right? It's an awesome UI.
So but when we think about productivity today, and we think about companies like Microsoft, we think about companies like Salesforce, we think about companies like Hootsuite, and you could sort of go down the list. what are they doing that impresses you today in the conversational sort of arena? Yeah, just productivity, not somebody that you flirt with, as sort of an experimental toy, but like something that is really more related to their core, whether it's Office or it's CRM or it's anything like that. Or are they just sort of sitting back in your mind and watching?
I think Microsoft has impressed the hell out of me. I was never a fan of Microsoft, and I think they're trying to reinvent themselves to make themselves relevant. And I think the steps that they've taken has really impressed me. The way that they've latched on to bots and made it theirs, and the way that they're merging bots into their core, right? Trying to bring their core back in, the Office, right? They just bought LinkedIn. That's awesome data, right? And I think that's going to increase productivity for millions and millions of users who use that platform.
I think I think mostly there are Slack bots right now because Slack is the platform that really is work related. I think in terms of productivity, Microsoft is definitely doing a lot in the bot space and AI, and they have the bot framework. I haven't really used any of their productivity related chatbots or bots in general. I think there are some startups definitely that are focusing on productivity, because previously you would have a software that would send you notification or updates through just regular app notifications, but now it is really just emerging where you can have interactive notifications and you can have this back and forth from a bot doing something productive for you on the back end and then letting you know once it's done, and you can kind of converse and get some information about it.
Have you used the Oracle bot yet?
I have not. Sounds like I should, based on your face. No. But I mean, you guys are bot entrepreneurs, or however you want to call it. Like, are you internally using a lot of bot technology, whether it's other companies within BetaWorks today, or Microsoft products, Google products, whatever it may be, to kind of be your own customer in some ways and really be on the forefront of thinking of UX and what types of data you should be licensing or using and capturing?
For sure. So we've been using bots for a while. Slack, we've been on for quite some time, and all the Slack bots. Giphy is an awesome one that comes to mind. But obviously ours, we eat our own dog food. Every single meeting that we set up, we use our own bot. We do research on VCs. We get introductions to VCs by using our own assistant. But we've used StatsBot, for example, for analytics. So we try and test almost every new bot that comes out that looks interesting.
Gia?
So Slack bots. One of the Slack bot that I used a lot was Plus Plus, which was kind of similar to Growbot, and I used it for kind of like just in hacky ways of like giving points to people. When I was in grad school before Bot Camp, I created a group for everybody to like kind of create different habits for each other, and then we'll give each other points with Plus Plus. So it's like a really interesting. Because they're all new, so it was just kind of like trying things out, but also finding new ways of using them. On Facebook Messenger, I've been using Purple a lot. I think many people have mentioned too, especially for the election, since there's so much going on, but we're very busy. So just as a way to get updates every day and get the most interesting things from the news. So trying out a lot of, especially Slack bots.
I think Bot Camp was great because when we came in, I think there was a lot of unknown unknowns. It's brand new. We're bot entrepreneurs, as you said. And so there was a lot of things that we just didn't know, whether it would work or not. So looking at everybody's bots within Bot Camp, but also bots outside of Bot Camp, looking at what's working, what's not, looking at onboarding, which is like one of the worst things to get wrong because you lose customers so fast. Retention, all of those steps. And so there's a lot of learnings that are going on, and I think we're all learning at the same time as this starts up.
So speaking of learning, I mean, in this category, something that I find entrepreneurs just obsess over is training data. Like, how do we get more training data to improve the humanity of our service, to improve the efficiency of our service, to strip out the need for humans even to intervene? what training data are you salivating over? Like, if you could get access to one trove of data, do one like massive transformational BD partnership, like what would dramatically increase the value of your business and the level of delight you can provide your customers?
So one of the things that we did in our alpha was we built a FAQ system for specifically a business around doing freelance or kind of solopreneur type of work.
Yeah.
And when we were testing it with our like early testers, there were a lot of kind of really general questions related to, you know, incorporation or just like small business questions in general. And that's definitely something that would have been really helpful if we had more training data on what type of questions, because it was mostly based on our own understanding and talking to a lot of people and figuring out what are likely questions that they will ask, and then training that in our NLP system. So that definitely would have been really helpful.
So we have about 250,000 chats in our system, logs, and we try and go through most of them, especially the ones that don't work out, don't go to the intended destination. So we learned quite a lot. Every time that we would launch in a new region, we would learn about how they use English, the English language. Everybody has a different word for meeting or for a range of things that we support. And so that was an interesting learning experience. Every time we launched on a different channel, like a different messenger, you would get a slightly different demographic, slightly different usage of the English language. Right now, we do sync into the user's email if they turn that on. We don't actually look through content, but if we actually ask them, that would be a great piece of learning as well, because most emails, most meetings happen in email, right? I think the other place too is LinkedIn, which is a shame that they don't open up their API. Their messenger, not overly used, but quite a lot of meetings and quite a lot of business happens in that messenger, the LinkedIn messenger. It'd be great if they had an API.
The sort of headlines, I would say, as bots were going like this and maybe like this, as they're starting to pick up, were sort of timed well with the headlines in the app space of apps are dead. And, you know, you pick up Wired, apps are dead. Maybe 6-12 months later, there was another headline, you know, piece, apps are dead. Sort of curious to know, as bots start to, you know, peak, or not peak, but gain momentum, how you get found, right? Because in the early days, when there aren't companies that are doing, there aren't many peers to what you do, it's easier. But how do people find you, right? The big problem with apps today is, one of the big problems is discovery. And that's one of the reasons why it's so frustrating to be a new developer. How do you solve that problem today, and sort of what advice do you have for other folks, I guess, trying to make a name there?
You're right. I mean, other than it's all about revenue, it's really all about distribution in any company. And you're right, at the beginning, the first ones in the Slack bot directory made it, you know, big. Everybody else, you know, number 500 is not doing so well. You know, for example, we built support for Skype, and we were number 4 bot for a long time, for over a month. We were getting a deluge of leads coming in from Skype, and then they changed their algorithm. They brought in bigger brands than us, and all of a sudden we were 20, and it just dropped. So it's a very important question to ask. I think for us, we're more of an enterprise play, so not necessarily traditional, but more like what Slack has done in the enterprise. So I think there's ways that we could reach out into the enterprise, not necessarily just from bot directories, which are a little bit more consumer facing.
For us, even though we are also productivity work bot, we're really a consumer company, so it is pretty different. I think during BotCamp, Phil actually was talking about kind of bot discovery almost like YouTube stars, and I really like thinking about it that way, because if you think about what service you're providing for us, for freelancers, and we think about what are the channels, if I'm an actual accountant or somebody that works for a freelancer, how would I reach those freelancers, right? Like, what are the channels, what are the blogs that they're reading, where are the places they're going to, where are events, and just thinking about how to scale that.
Right. In some ways, it's like, also, you don't want to be found in a bot directory, because somebody that is looking to solve a problem is, if you're looking to solve a scheduling problem, your first thought isn't, I'm going to go to the bot directory to solve my scheduling problem. It's, I'm going to go to Google and type, web-based assistant or virtual assistant, and then maybe then I'll arrive on you. Or similarly with you, I'm trying to solve an accounting problem or something like that, so I'm going to go to the Intuit App Store as opposed to a bot store, something like that. Looks like we may have time for a question or two. Anybody in the audience want to chat productivity?
Productivity's fun.
Come on. All right.
Matt has a question.
He's got a beard scratch. Do you? Yeah.
Spencer, what productivity tools are you using?
What, bot-based or just in general? Yeah, I used X.AI for a while. That was useful, but I sort of compartmentalized it off into its own space, but it kind of got rolled into the functionality of a human that I worked with, and that was less useful to me, but that's probably the one that I've used the most. I use Digit a fair amount too. So, cool. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.